Welcome back to our special, The New Space Race. What an honor to talk to a real-life astronaut, Dr. Charles Camarda. He was the NASA Director of Engineering at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, and he's the author of Mission Out of Control. And I should note that his first space flight was NASA's return to flight mission, the first mission after the loss of the space shuttle Columbia. Sir, an honor to talk to you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
But before we get to NASA and the future of space travel, can you help me understand the courage that it took to get into a rocket ship after what happened with Columbia? What was in your head the night before, as you walk into the shuttle, as it's taking off? What is going through your head all those times?
Well, actually, we were very well trained. We trained for about 2 years. And so we were all very calm. We know what the risks are. We know that space shuttle, you have a risk of 1 in 67 that you might not come back. We felt confident that we had new technology that can help keep us a little bit safer. And so our whole mission was dedicated to validating this technology to make sure that we would continue to fly space shuttles safely.
How'd you sleep the night before?
How'd I sleep? I slept very well. I never sleep all that long. I sleep about maybe 5 hours. And we had very, very good breakfast. And, I was on the mid deck. And so I didn't have a whole lot of jobs to do. So we were very relaxed on the mid deck, waiting 2.5 hours before launch.
Unbelievable. Can you speak to the people behind the scenes, all the engineers, all the scientists that are involved in these missions as well? I love what SpaceX is doing. I think they're the first I saw it, where when they have the launch, they have like microphones on the crowd, on everyone who works there, like cheering and celebrating. You're like, oh yeah, this is a huge team effort, and that's really important to know. Can you speak to that?
Sure. I love what SpaceX is doing. They're making space exciting. They're very open.
Yeah.
You could see the failures openly. People cheer when there are failures because they're learning from these failures. It takes thousands of people on the ground, Mike, at Kennedy Space Center, at Johnson Space Center, and around the world. The people on mission control team, our trainers, they're all on the loop. They're monitoring all the systems. They're ready to give information to the flight director to feed back to us.
What do you make, and then I'll ask you about NASA after this, but what do you make about the current crop of mathematicians and scientists and engineers? Do we have enough? Much is said about our education system in a country and STEM and all the rest. Like, do we have what it takes as like the American people to continue this space dominance?
I don't think so right now. I think NASA is seriously broken. We have some amazing people. We don't have enough. But NASA stopped investing in real applied research shortly after the Apollo program, over 30, 40 years ago. And so we've eroded this, what I call research culture. We have what we call a production and operations culture. And I think NASA needs to step back and go back to its roots.
Okay, tell me the difference between those two things.
Okay, a research culture, a research engineer compared to a really good engineer. A really good engineer will tell you what they think is going to happen, how a system is going to behave, and what tools they used. A research engineer is the person that developed those tools, did the physics-based analysis, did the testing in the laboratory, tested to failure. And so usually they have advanced degrees and they focus on research, understanding the knowledge, validating that knowledge through tests, and comparing that knowledge and competing that knowledge with other people around the country.
And what is NASA focusing on now, and what do they need to do?
I think NASA needs to go back to the way it was before it was NASA, when it was the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, NACA. We only had 3 small research laboratories, and we advanced the state of the art in aircraft for this country before we went back into World War II. I think we need to do that for space. We need to go back to research, teaming up with our partners in industry, and transferring that research, that far-term knowledge and new technology, that breakthrough technology, so our industry in the United States can pick it up and make us the best in the world.
In the last segment, we were talking about strong leadership and clear visions and focus. Like, we're going to go to the moon, right? Like, that's a clear vision. What would be your vision for NASA? Like, what's the point? What's your objective?
I think maybe we go to the moon, but only as a foothold. I think we need to set our sights on Mars. I think Elon Musk is absolutely correct. I think NASA needs to get out of administering large space projects. Okay, let industry do that. I think we need to go back into doing the research, developing that technology, and let the people like Musk, Jeff Bezos, and others build the systems to take us to the moon if it's feasible and if it's profitable and if it makes sense.
Man, that's a huge shift. And I'm surprised, to be honest, I'm surprised about a NASA director talking about like such a major shift of what NASA is and what it should be in the future.
I think that's what it's going to have to take. We had two very bad accidents, and we had those accidents because of the culture at NASA. We haven't fixed the problem. There are still echoes of Challenger and Columbia.
Ooh, tell me more. How so?
How so? Well, we're using the same procedures to make decisions to tell us we're ready to fly when we're not. We don't have the really good researchers that are looking over and critically evaluating these technologies. Take, for instance, the heat shield on Artemis. NASA basically hid that there was a serious problem with the heat shield on Artemis when it flew around the moon on Artemis 1 with an uncrewed vehicle. They hid it from the public and they refused to develop an independent Tiger team to take a look at it and develop an advanced heat shield. We have them on the books. We have heat shields that would have worked. NASA refused to do that.
What what are the systems that are in place at NASA? How much of that is because it's a government-y kind of thing? Like, is that just the bureaucracy of it versus a more startup mentality of SpaceX? Is that the problem? One of the inherent problems with NASA?
Absolutely. When I started working for NASA almost 50 years ago, NASA was SpaceX. We were a research
Yeah.
organization. We failed smart, fast, small, cheap, early and often. And the technology that Elon Musk is using right now was the technology that we developed in the 70s. He's advanced it incrementally and he's doing amazing things, but we could do so much better. And that's what NASA needs to be doing. Right now, industry could build large rockets, send human certified vehicles better than NASA, building engines better than NASA, faster, less expensive, and on schedule.
You've mentioned a couple times the importance of failing often. Speak to that if you don't mind.
Absolutely. That's what we learn as researchers in a laboratory. You fail in a laboratory and you use a building block approach. You fail smart, fast, small, cheap, early and often. Every experiment counts. You get the most information from those experiments, and that helps you to learn and discover new things. Then you take that and you use a building block approach to build larger systems. That's the way we did things. We didn't fail big and slow and stupid like we're failing now.
Yes. What would your advice be to the next NASA director that is confirmed as a confirmed position, I believe? What's your advice to this person, their mindset, their worldview they should have?
Right. Whoever gets confirmed, I would say, read my book. Come talk to me. Come talk to the older folks that were at NASA when NASA was an amazing organization and learn how we used to do things back then because it's very similar to way industries like Elon Musk and SpaceX are doing things right now, only we had an advanced research organization.
Is there an American pride you feel when you're an astronaut, you're up in space?
Absolutely. When people ask me what was the most amazing thing about being in space, we were there for a very short time, 14 days. We had a very focused mission, technology we had to develop and validate for the next shuttle flights. And it was that camaraderie, that team behavior, working together on this amazing team with people on the ground, training very hard for anything that could happen to us. We had three near misses on our flight. We worked the problems, we solved the problems. We did an on-orbit repair unheard of, which if we didn't do it, if we didn't repair the TPS on our vehicle, we would not have made it home safe.
Whoa. I have 4 kids. What characteristic do you think an astronaut needs to have that you would recommend we try to instill in our young people?
I would say it's that thirst for knowledge, that curiosity. We need to definitely revamp, transform our education system. We need to make learning fun. I started a nonprofit, the Epic Education Foundation, getting kids used to challenge-based learning, putting them together on teams, showing them how to get the knowledge to creatively solve these problems.
Yeah, and getting kids to want to be astronauts again, right? Like all these kids want to be basketball players or whatever. But like I remember growing up, like that was like the idea, like that was like the pinnacle of cool thing. It was like doctor or astronaut. I don't know, do kids even want to do it anymore?
I think they do. I absolutely think they do. We still have thousands of people that apply to be astronauts. It's still a pretty cool job. I really love being a researcher. I became an astronaut. I was the oldest rookie to fly in space. I was 53 years old. I was working in
Wow.
research for 22 years, and I'm going back to that now. I really had a tremendous amount of joy solving complex problems. And training as an astronaut was just the cherry on the cake.
Amazing. Dr. Charles Camarda, the book is called Mission Out of Control. Go get it right now. Sir, wonderful to talk to you, sir. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Thanks for having me.
How about that? Thank you, sir. How about that? An astronaut. Start to an astronaut. Pretty cool. How should we look at space and the Bible? Well, the story I just remembered before the end of the last break was the Apollo 8 mission. This was the first mission to the moon. We didn't land on the moon, but they circled around it. When they got up there and they looked back at Earth, they recited Genesis 1, verse 1 through 10. The 3 astronauts took turn. There actually is a copy of the flight plan with Genesis 1, 1 through 10 written on it. And it's at one of the observatories in Chicago, so you can see it. Isn't that amazing? The Bible and space. Any scientist in the world will tell you that the greatest scientist in history was Isaac Newton. And one of the most fascinating parts of Isaac Newton's life is that he was a Christian who spent most of his time studying the Bible. Most of it. All the incredible amazing he did, most of his time, he was a theologian. And theology is like everything. Like there's this idea today that you have to be a scientist, you have to be an atheist. That's a new idea. I love this post I just saw it the other day. Someone said, "Is there a secret science that bridges all science together?" And someone wrote back, "Yeah, theology." And that was what Isaac Newton knew. Just some quotes of his. He says, "Gravity," that's the quote, that's the site or the picture. Yeah, all those sciences bridged together by theology. Some Isaac Newton quotes. He said, "Gravity explains the motion of the planets, but it cannot explain who set the planets in motion." He said, "The wonderful arrangement and harmony of the cosmos would only originate in the plan of an almighty omniscient being. This is and remains my greatest comprehension." In Principia, his most famous work, he said, "The being governs all things, not as the soul of the world, but as Lord over all. The supreme being is a being eternal, infinite, absolutely perfect. And from his true dominion, it follows that the true God is a living, intelligent, and powerful being." This is Isaac Newton. "Oh, but scientists are atheists. Oh, you believe in man up in sky, imaginary man?" Yes, so did Isaac Newton. He is not eternity, infinity, but eternal and infinite. He is not duration or space, but he endures and is present. Isaac Newton's objective was to get people closer to God through his science, to see more of God. He said, "When I wrote my treatise about our system," it's like solar system, "I had an eye upon such principles as might work with considering men for the belief of a deity. And nothing can rejoice me more than to find it useful for that purpose." He wanted men to see his science and to see God. Isn't that amazing? And I believe it's true for all science, but space too. The more you study space, the more you believe in God, the creator, which is why our Apollo 8 astronauts read Genesis 1. They didn't read the Big Bang. They read Genesis 1. You know, people ask this question, where did God come from? Where did he come from? But God is not affected by time, space, or matter. Think about it, time, space, matter. All 3 of those things have to exist at the exact same moment. They have to begin and come into being in the same moment. If you have matter, but no space, where would you put it? If you had matter but no time, when would you put it? So think about it, they all have to exist at the same time, and the Bible accounts for that. The opening line, in the beginning, time, God created the heaven, space, and the earth, matter. Time, space, matter. God created them, therefore he's outside of them. The God who created the universe is outside of the universe, and he created all of it. I encourage you to read two books. One's a secular book. It's called Brief History of Nearly Everything. And it has amazing stuff in there about the scope of the universe and the size of the universe and how many thousands and thousands of years it would take you traveling at the speed of light to get to Pluto. And that's just the outside of our solar system. And there's millions of solar systems. It's crazy to think about. And God created all of it. And then there's another great book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. And this is an apologetics book that was pivotal in my becoming a Christian, to understand the finely tuned universe and how if a single thing were different in our entire atmosphere, or the tilt of the earth, or the distance from the sun, or the strength of gravity, if one thing were different, one of countless things were different, then it would be impossible to exist. Science, far from being an atheist pursuit, it's a pursuit that seeks to uncover and reveal God's creation. Just like Isaac Newton saw it. Innovation, it's like coming up with inventions and innovating, it's an act of creation that we engage in, just like God did in creating everything around us. I only got about 2 minutes, but I want to make this point really quick. I believe that the MAGA movement is at its core a movement of building and discovery. Marxism was created by a guy named Karl. Karl was a wretched creature, an awful person. When you know more about Karl, then Marxism makes sense, because Karl was all about death and destruction as a person. Therefore, Marxism reflects that. MAGA's core, if Trump was the beginning of the MAGA movement, Trump is a builder, first and foremost. So MAGA at its core is building as well. It is rooted in building. That's what MAGA is. It's about building and innovating and creating. We need more of that in this country. Now, there's going to be a little bit of destruction that needs to take place too, right? Like God told Gideon to tear down his father's altars. Judges 6:25, right? Take your father's bull and pull down the altar of Baal, cut down the Asherah that's beside it, and then build an altar to the Lord your God on top of that stronghold. Similarly, 2 Kings 23, King Josiah, when he discovered the law again, he ordered the tearing down of all the temples to Baal. He desecrated the areas dedicated to child sacrifice to Moloch, right? Tearing down the high places. You got to tear down sometimes before you can rebuild properly and righteously. Of course, the flood would be the ultimate example of that as well. Destruction can be righteous as long as we rebuild righteously to glorify God after. And that's what science and innovation is all about. And to me, space is the pinnacle of that, because it's everything we do. That's what Corinthians says, right? 1 Corinthians 10:31, whatever you're eating or drinking, doing, do it all to the glory of God. We have to get back to that in this country, that everything we do, everything we create, everything we innovate, everywhere we travel, even in space, is done for the glory of God, honoring him. MAGA and this American golden age is at its core a movement of building by builders. My podcast, Politics by Faith, you can listen to it anywhere you download podcasts. We do this every day. We take the news of the day, whatever's happening, run it through a biblical lens. There's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new in the entire universe that God created. So this is our chance to understand the Bible even more. And hopefully, like Isaac Newton did in his pursuits, we can unveil who God is a little more, even through the news of the day. Politics by Faith is the name of the podcast, anywhere you listen to podcast. Mike Slater, The First TV, spread the word.